Union? Where did the name Storytellers Union even come from? Tell us a little bit about the history.
You know, I actually thought about that the other day. I know that we were trying to think of what we call ourselves, and we threw a lot of names out there. I don't really remember who came up with Storytellers Union.
Do you remember that?
I think it was Kevin, actually.
I was trying to think of that too.
I seem like I remember a long list of, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Right. It was almost like we put it to a vote. Is that?
I honestly don't remember. I remember
this process was obviously as far back as some of the songs are old.
Right. When did you all become Storytellers Union?
Would it be 8-9 years now?
Some would say we've always been known that.
I can't really recall a time in my life when there wasn't music. It was ever present, always there. I was born in Logan, West Virginia, and grew up in church, so we had lots of gospel music. And gospel music in Southern West Virginia is Southern gospel, very country-ish, minimal instrumentation, even bluegrass influenced, lots of just a cappella groups. My mom, she played piano in our church, and she taught piano as well, so there was a piano in our home, so we had music at home. The other music we had at home, and the only secular music we were really allowed to listen to at the time, was my father's music. He was a child of the 50s, a big Elvis fan, and through him I was exposed to things like the Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, all those great talents and voices.
My first musical memories, I'm going to say I was probably maybe 3 or 4. I don't really remember the age, but what I do remember was I had this tiny little acoustic guitar. And this is as far as me like really remembering music, remember playing or anything. There used to be a show called the Porter Wagner Show. It was a country show. And that sounds odd with the kind of music that we do. And but it was old school country, and Porter Wagner would, I believe, open the show every time with some sort of like guitar playing intro, and I would go get this guitar and I would go and get it set in front of the TV, then I would just stand on it, not really play it or anything, but just stand on it because I was so excited that there was somebody there actually, you know, playing guitar, yes, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I knew it was, wow, this is awesome. And the way I expressed that was just jumping up on my guitar because it was just so exciting to me as a little kid.
Mom tells us a story that when I was a baby in my bouncer, at about like 3 months old, that she was listening to the radio while she's cleaning the house one day, and I'm in my little bouncer, and the song You Sexy Thing, maybe it's You Sexy Thing, that came on by Hot Chocolate, came on the radio, and she saw me over there rocking back and forth and just bouncing and giggling in my bouncer, and pretty much knew I was gonna love music.
So naturally, when there's things that you're not allowed to have as a child, that's what you want more. And so I really longed for whatever bits of pop culture and music that I could get. I'd hear things at school, I'd sneak and listen to the radio. I would hide a transistor radio that I would take to bed with me at night and hide under the covers and hear all this wonderful music.
I was about 7 years old, and I have a pretty clear memory of this. Mom sat me down, and she said, you know, I know that you listen to songs. I know that you listen to lyrics and what they mean. There's 2 songs I want you to listen to. And I really want you to listen to the words, and then we'll talk about it. And those 2 songs were John Lennon's Imagine and Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. It meant a lot to me. And from that moment on, lyrics and songs and music became more than just a beat or a rhythm. It became life, and it became meaning.
I remember coming home from my grandparents, and in my child's mind, it's, gosh, I want to say midnight, maybe later. Sure, it wasn't that late at all, but in my mind, as a child, it was. And the Who's We Won't Get Fooled Again comes on the radio, and it's got this synth going on at the beginning, and I remember being so terrified by these sounds in the middle of the night, yet so fascinated by them, especially when the guitars kick in. You know, that may have triggered the love of rock and roll right there. I really believe that I have my dad to thank for my love of the blues. He was a ZZ Top fan from way back in the day. Stuff like Tres Hombres, just all that Texas blues.
I know music obviously meant a lot to me even before I had memories of it doing so, because there's a picture of me as just a wee little thing, and I'm there with my Roy Rogers guitar, and I posted that to Facebook a few years ago, and Doug in short order posted a reply pic that he photoshopped with the two of us together, him even younger than I am in the photo, but with the exact same Roy Rogers guitar.
Well, the first time I met Kevin, it's going to make him sound bad because I was 13 years old, and it was in Girl Scouts.
I was at the junior high because my mother was a teacher there. She also was a Girl Scout troop leader, and my sister and Jerry were in my mother's Girl Scout troop.
So he was there, and he was about 15 and already at high school, and he was nice, he was sweet, he was cute, and we hit it all.
Obviously, I didn't think a lot of it at the time. It's funny to look back on now, but over the years, we became closer than she was to my sister, to the point that when she would call for my sister and my sister wasn't home, I would talk to her. And we obviously had music in common even back then, and it was one of the things we really bonded over.
We pretty quickly realized that we had a lot in common. We both really liked music, and we liked a lot of the same music, and at 13 and 15, that's enough to spark a pretty good friendship.
And went to shows together, and it was just a natural extension that when I began to be in bands and play my own music and play with some of the other guys, that we would bring her in, someone who actually could sing and had real talent, and she even appears on some of those early recordings from my high school and college era groups, joined us on stage, and obviously that love of music is something, and we've shared that passion for our whole lives, so long before it was ever romantic, and in a lot of ways it was music that kind of pushed us from friendship into romance.
As far as making music with Kevin and Jerry goes, I met Kevin in a journalism class in high school. He was in the 11th grade. It was my first year of high school at Logan High. I was in 10th grade. And we also had the class with a guy named Dave McGuire who was in 12th grade. He was a senior.
We met in Miss Ross's journalism class at Logan High School. He and his friends, awkward and odd as they seemed to us, we had, my group of friends that I was in that class with, had kind of dubbed those guys the journalism geeks, because they seemed just that, very geeky. Little as we know that was the exact same nickname that they had for us.
In the journalism class, Kevin sat across the room with a couple of his friends, lifelong friends of his that he came up through junior high with, and they had a little a cappella kind of tongue-in-cheek thing they called the Soap Studs, but they were talented. They could actually sing and carry a tune, and McGuire knew I played bass. I would let that be known. So McGuire's an excellent guitar player, still is to this day. We just kind of formed out of that.
So, as any good geeks know, there are strength in numbers, and once we started to talk and hang out together, we found out a lot that we had in common.
from slightly warped senses of humor, slightly outcast images that we kind of had for ourselves, lots of similarities in the music department, and because of that was what we really began to hang out over. And those guys were musicians, and they played instruments, and they needed a singer. Well, I was a writer. I wrote a lot of lyrics, I wrote a lot of poems, I was very comfortable with that side of things. I didn't consider myself a singer, I didn't consider myself obviously a musician, but as the only guy amongst this small group that had formed of friends that didn't play an instrument, I sort of ended up the singer by default.
Dave had some pretty cool musical taste. Of course, he was a Beatles fan, and you know, how can you not love the Beatles? But he was also a huge U2 fan, and turned us on to a lot of cool music.
Our guitar player was pretty good. The rest of them were kind of neophytes in their instruments. Doug at the time was on bass. Our drummer kind of had a single beat he could work with, and I was even more limited in the fact that I brought nothing to the table. I had no microphone for those first couple of practices. I never had any monitors, speakers. A lot of times I would be sharing the bass amp with the guitar amp, but I particularly remember those first few practices, and actually many practices after that, depending on if we had everything set up, is that I couldn't hear myself. I never could. Everything was just screamed to the top of my lungs in hopes that I was being heard over top of the racket the rest of the guys were making.
Started messing around, making a lot of noise in my parents' garage.
I remember in the summers we would open up the front of the garage hoping that the sound emanating out of it would attract the women of Lake, West Virginia, into thinking that there was some rock and roll gods in the making there in that garage, and they'd come listen. It happened a time or two. I don't know how impressed they were, but every now and then we would get passersby in the neighborhood that would come and listen into what we were doing. Early 90s, we were all kind of big into U2. This was right after they broke big, but a lot of us had followed them for a while, so we were kind of a U2 cover band. We had lots and lots of Sunday, Bloody Sunday massacres of our own. So after that initial band, I was in a few others real briefly that didn't include Doug, but it didn't take very long that our paths converged again, and we ended up in the band that we would spend most of our youth in.
That was really our high school band.
It eventually ended up being known as World's Edge, and we spelled it with a Z because we thought that was somehow cooler.
I just remember like Doug just started being that person that, okay, you're a part of the group, all right, and then, you know, that natural metamorphosis of, well, I'm friends with this person, so that vis-a-vis makes me friends with you. And ultimately, I mean, over the next several years through high school and college in particular, Doug became one of my best friends, and we spent, you know, lots of time together, and he became really my closest confidant.
To be honest, I'm not really sure when or where Jerry and I met. She's just one of those people who's always been in my life.
I was kind of always around.
World's Edge was a thing, and she was part of that. You know, she was there at our very first gig. I think she was there at all the World's Edge gigs.
You know, I just kind of wanted to be a part of it because I really believed in what they were doing. And and this is not just a wife or now bandmate talking, I still am a really big fan of Kevin. I'm a big fan of Kevin's lyrics, and I've always been a fan of his songs. And so even as a kid, I'm like, I want in on what these guys are doing because they're going to be huge, and I wanted to be a part of that. And it's fun, as a teenage girl to be part of that.
I think, at least for myself, I function better as a studio guy. That's where I love to be. That's where I love to play. I love that creative process.
It was a real formative band for us in that it took us from the covers that we were doing before to a band that was primarily doing original material. And as a lyricist, that was it for me. Once we started writing songs and creating something out of nothing, it was really addictive.
We had we recorded an album on a 4-track cassette recorder, I think it was a Tascam, a 4-track recorder. We would bounce down tracks, get drums, guitars, bass, vocals, leads, guitars, rhythms, all that good stuff, and just kept bouncing it down. And then mass produced them on cassette.
So when we were at World's Edge, the guys wanted to play out, and I wasn't so sure because I didn't feel comfortable, didn't think we were good enough, and to be quite honest, as the front man, I was going to be the one expected to talk to the crowd and be out front, and I was actually painfully shy and just terrified at the thought. And they wanted to play Gumby's in these bars in Huntington, and that also terrified me. And I didn't know how to explain that to my parents. But the compromise was we ended up playing a bunch of grade schools.
Yeah, we were rocking on the grade school circuit. I'm not sure they were the best gigs. We still needed a lot of polish.
But that first show we did at Dingus just had some hilarious memories.
The grade school had no stage, just flat floor on the gym. So the guys were building the stage.
I was trying to play on the gym floor, but that wasn't good enough. We had to be elevated so that they would look up at us.
Spray painting the plywood black, and we set this plywood up on a couple of metal bleachers, and after that we set up all our gear on top of that.
So if you picture those benches you used to have in your grade school cafeteria and a few cinder blocks, that was all that was supporting this plywood that we then put on top 4 rather healthy teenage boys and hundreds of pounds of amps and guitars and drum kit. It's a wonder we didn't break our necks. I remember that the thing bounced like it was a trampoline, and I was terrified we were going to have an accident.
The cassette tape that we were selling for the album You Are Here had some album artwork that had been drawn and of course photocopied off and things, and so it's black and white.
Jerry and her friend were coloring our inserts during the show so that we could sell the cassette. They were actually coloring the sleeve.
So I would be selling the tape and go, hey, do you want it, $5, do you want it colored? And yeah. And so, okay, I have to color it in real quick and then sell it that way.
I think we did some Tesla too, maybe Love Song. I think that's may have been popular at the time, so everybody was on board with that song. I remember I used to play barefoot all the time. That was my thing. I was a barefoot bass player back then. And it was my gimmick. I'm a wrestling geek, so why not have a gimmick?
And they would go nuts and treat you like you were rock stars. Autographs, and they'd just go wild about the whole thing.
We love you, Kevin!
But everything else we did, not exactly appropriate for a grade school audience. Our World's Edge originals and War Pigs, Decadence Dance. But we did it, and got paid for it, and were able to sell our album.
And if that wasn't Spinal Tap enough, that show also, we had lasers. We had to have lasers, and it literally was one laser. You had to look at the right spot in order to be able to see it. Had to have it pointed out to you, probably. We had this grand idea. We were also going to have this huge merch stand with T-shirts, and the kid that a friend of ours who had hand-drawn the cover art to our cassette we were selling was supposed to produce these T-shirts. Again, hand-drawn, so we expected him to show up with a number of shirts, and instead he showed up and only had time to produce one shirt. So instead of having T-shirts, we had T-shirt singular, and instead of having T-shirt sales, we decided to have a raffle for the one and only out there somewhere, a collector's item.
Between the stage and I think we took everybody out to breakfast or dinner or something like that afterwards. I think that blew our entire anything we'd actually made from the show. The greatest to hear people driving off, playing our 4-track recordings on their car stereos as they drove away, and knowing that somewhere out there, there's that World's Edge T-shirt. Sometimes you're just not ready for it, and I'm not quite sure as World's Edge we were ever really ready for it. But we did it anyway, regardless.
And the funny thing is that, yes, we were amateurs. You go back and you realize that, gosh, we didn't have much in the way of chops, but the nuggets of the ideas that were there, some of the music and the lyrics and things I can look back at and go, I see what those kids were trying to do. And again, everyone starts somewhere, and that was kind of where we began. Jerry and I lived in Huntington while we were at Marshall, and then we ended up moving to Ashland. And during that time, Doug was primarily in Pittsburgh and then back in Logan for a long while. So geographically, we were separated, and we weren't doing music, really, any of us. But when he got to Huntington, he suggested that we start getting together on Wednesday nights and just no pressure. We won't call it a band. Let's just start writing again. And before you knew it, it was a band. We were calling ourselves Storytellers Union, and we brought Jerry in because she makes everything sound so much better. And the three of us pretty much recorded over and over for 16, 17 years, collecting these songs until we finally put out a debut album.
If we had had 20, 30 people that downloaded it and said that they liked it, that would have been, unthinkable when we were finishing it.
Yeah, I would have expected our parents to like it, and that would have been
Yeah.
really.
But when friends started commenting and saying they'd listened to it, downloaded it,
And people we didn't even know were downloading it. I mean, it's just like friends of friends, and track where some of this stuff was coming from. It was like, we don't even know. It went beyond this small little circle that we kind of thought that it would maybe find. I was kind of surprised after the release how good it felt in some ways to be free of songs that we've been playing for so long. You get together for 15, 16 years and you play the same set of songs, and then we occasionally record some of these songs, and it just was like this fun thing that we did. But I guess I wasn't prepared after the release for just how good it would feel to think of them as
Kevin and Doug became almost obsessed with watching like the download numbers, and like I'm getting a daily, if not hourly, report on somebody else downloaded it, and we had 5, click throughs.
Fine without a smile. You can prove me otherwise. I want that country now. Down to Big John English Farm, started lying there. 27, cold as ice, death blowing through her head. God say it isn't so. Why did you let us go? God say it isn't so. Why did you let us
It's kind of a process where I create something, pitch it to Kevin, and he either makes it work or he doesn't. And if it makes it work, we go run with it. If it doesn't, I dismantle it and use it in other places.
The smiles of the saddest people. The smiles of the saddest people in the world.
I like where it goes here, so I mean, you wanted to use that as just a break or a solo section or bridge? But this last time there was a couple of instances where I was able to actually sing and record my vocal part, the melody, and Doug was able to put the music behind it. And I mean, that was the best I never had. That was something that completely I heard in my head, and he was able to recreate what I heard in my head, despite the fact I couldn't sit down there and map it out for him other than just sing it to him. And we had tried that in the past and it never worked. It's still easier, obviously, for Doug to come up with music and for me to put lyrics to it. But on those occasions when I do have a melody, it's nice to think that there's a possibility that he might be able to, maybe we can catch lightning in a bottle again, and he might be able to feed off of that and be able to recreate it.
And it's kind of a fun challenge to try that, because like our process is pretty much a fully formed song handed to you and say, hey, can we do something with this? You just come up with the melody, the lyrics, whatever. And when you come to me, hey, I got this idea.
It might give us a different kind of
And
song.
I tapped it out.
Right.
I've always been the backing vocal, and that's where I'm most comfortable. So actually putting a couple of my own songs on there has been a little nerve-wracking, but they've encouraged it, and
I'd like to see more of it.
I would like to as well, and we'll see. I still get a little nervous about it, but
Kind of every step of the way, Doug and I have been sort of in tandem, working together, and it's just kind of a real, special thing to have lifelong friends like Doug and Jerry, who I've been making music with for so very long, and for that to be something that we all still enjoy.
And as proud as we are of that first album, I think that my bandmates would agree with me here that we think that we could do better. I mean, we like it. It was good to do it. It was a great experience. The reaction was more than we thought, but now it's like, okay, now we got to top ourselves, because a lot of people listened, a lot of people tuned in because they were curious, and not all those folks will necessarily come back when it's not new or different. So now you almost feel like there's the challenge of, okay, to get people to listen this time, we have to make it better.
The past is present again.
Sexy. I think I can.
Sexy chocolate ninja space.
I think
No, I
that's
just call it Kevin
yeah.
Sexy.
Oh,
pretty much that sums up the whole band right there in one word. Just
sexy.
I think.
This is Storytellers Union.
Kids on the same ride, living on world's edge, as if we could never slide. We were kids on the same ride.